Spencer's is one of those stores in the mall that everyone knows about, even if you don't shop there yourself. It's infamous for being alternative, edgy, and, most of all, being the store that you do not take your parents into. The main experiences I've had with Spencer's were when I was in middle school, just wandering around the mall with my friends because we're 12 and have no money to do anything else. Only to giggle when walking by the store because have you heard what they sell in there? And then, as maturely and unsuspiciously as possible, we'd go in pretending to look at all of the other peculiar products, while along the way creeping towards the notorious adult section in the back corner, where we eventually faced an entire wall full of things that 12-year-olds should not be looking at. We'd run back outside, vowing to never enter again, forever changed. But before we get into Spencer's, what if your sleep could be forever changed? With this video's sponsor, Manta Sleep. The pro-nap movement is Manta Sleep's response to hustle culture and is all about ditching the grind set to make napping not just more enjoyable, but also empowering. And I don't know about you, but I love a good nap. I mean, they don't call me Dream Jelly for nothing. Manta sleep masks prioritize quality, comfort, and adaptability with a range of different materials, styles, and add-on accessories to cater to your sleep style and needs. Each mask is fully and easily adjustable. The soft Velcro head strap, blackout eye cups, and detachable machine-washable inner layer can all be shifted to give you a comfortable and restful sleep. Even the Bluetooth headphones built into my Manta Sound sleep mask can be moved to just the right position, giving me a perfect way to listen to my favorite emo music that always puts me right to sleep. If you want to get a better night's rest, you can visit mantasleep.com and use my code DREAMJELLY for 10% off your order to enter the ProNap dreamland. Thanks again to Manta Sleep for the sponsor, and now back to the video. Aside from having what seems to be the universal Spencer's experience and buying a couple septum rings there once, I never really gave Spencer's much thought, except to wonder, why is it like that? Why and how did it become the mall's main source for quirky mugs, hilarious graphic tees, Rick and Morty merch, and adult-themed products all in one? Who exactly is their target demographic, since it's clearly not overly curious middle school girls? And does anyone actually regularly shop there? To really get the full picture, it's best to start at the very beginning, and with Spencer's, that dates all the way back to 1947, when Spencer Gifts was launched as a mail-order catalog. Shopping through catalogs back in the day was basically the equivalent of online shopping now, where the products range from common and menial to oddly specific, since to make the most of the market, catalogs would sell anything and everything. Like in this issue of Spencer Gifts from 1954, there's a variety of household items like a shoe rack, a letter holder, moth spray, right next to the full-page spread where you can mail order live Mexican burros. You know, practical stuff. To be fair, you used to be able to order entire houses by catalog, and other companies like Sears also sold donkeys and horses in their catalogs too. But those were specifically for farm stock, instead of being advertised as lovable, huggable, tame pets for your children to ride around on. But the live animals thing was more of an outlier. Most of the Spencer Gifts stock fell under home goods, including a wide range of aerosol chemicals to spray on anything and everything, each with its own varying purpose, or items that had less broad spray this on everything uses, and were for very particular purposes instead, like a corn kernel cutter, corn butterer, self-buttering corn dishes, a butter melter for putting on corn and that also looks like corn. I didn't know people were so into corn in the 60s. For non-corn related needs though, there was also an electric worm catcher, or an electric water boiler that works by plugging it in and sticking it right into the water, which seems very useful and very safe. I don't want to spend too much time on these catalogs, but I did find myself getting reeled in by all of the whimsical items that you can buy for just a couple of bucks. Some of my personal favorites were these sumptuous satin fruits, a mystery box that was kind of ahead of its time, a Tooth Tunes toothbrush sold 45 years before the modern version, a life-size and beautiful mermaid, this accordion puppy, and a giant inflatable hand. Really, a lot of the stuff in these catalogs is just a product of the 50s and 60s being the way they were, and doesn't have all that much to do with Spencer's as a brand. But the overall focus was aimed towards not just giftable items, but novelties in general, whether practical or more on the obscure side. In 1963, the first physical Spencer Gifts location opened in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, in Cherry Hill Mall, the first step in cementing Spencer's as part of the typical mall experience for 12-year-olds all over the country in the coming years. The physical store and catalogs did well enough that by the 1970s, the physical locations had expanded and the merchandise range started to change with the times too. The catalogs in stores were still mostly full of home goods, though instead of just focusing on donkeys and various corn-related products, the stock leaned into the novelty aspect even more, becoming wacky and even adult-themed at times. Gag gifts, which are made for the sole purpose of being goofy and impractical for a punchline, were occasionally included in older catalogs, like these shapely inflatable legs to prank your friends, or the classic box that has no function except to turn itself back off. But as the store grew, these types of items were becoming a Spencer Gifts staple. Even though gag gifts don't really serve a functional purpose, there was a niche market to be filled of everyone that needed to get someone a gift but had no idea what to buy. Or just for anyone else who thought that something like the Dum Dum mug was top-tier comedy. Despite what Spencer's is most known for today, the catalogs actually started off pretty tame, with the most scandalous of items just being some bras and underwear, and man girdles, which admittedly were probably still considered relatively indecent at the time. But into the 70s, some products got a little raunchy, like Mr. Funky Feet here, or this doll. And other items even featured explicit adult content for more mature or immature audiences, depending on how you look at it. Alongside the gag gifts, adult section, and the home goods, or whatever category a deed of ownership to a square foot of Texas fits into, other items like clothes, jewelry, patches, and personal wellness products all seem to target a different demographic compared to what was considered regular stock. Fashion and wacky slogans featured in the product range during this era appealed to a younger, more trendy audience, rather than the average aerosol-spraying, corn-loving housewife of the previous decades. And of course, the classic lava lamps of the 70s also had their place in stores, just like they still do in the modern Spencer's today. The lava lamps, along with blacklight posters and other head shop-esque items, leaned into hippie and counterculture, which were especially popular with teenagers and young adults at the time. As mall culture became even more prominent in the 80s, Spencer Gifts expanded with it. It became known as the place in the mall that was especially fun to browse just to look at what wild and crazy stuff they had in stock. There was something for everyone, whether you cared more about the silly t-shirts, prank and gag gifts, the ever-expanding adult-themed section, or if you were looking for something hilarious and witty for your middle-aged friend's birthday, because middle-aged people will always find over-the-hedge jokes funny, no matter the decade. Pop culture and branded products did have somewhat of a place in store in previous years, but these also became more popular as the 80s progressed, with licensed merch of franchises like Garfield and Star Wars. Though Spencer's would eventually acquire Spirit Halloween in 1999, at least as far back as the 80s, if not even earlier, the store would still be fully filled with plenty of costumes, props, and decorations for the Halloween season too, keeping on brand as a #1 source for novelty, seasonal or otherwise. Into the 90s, Spencer's started making more business moves to reach a wider audience and expand the brand, reaching over 700 stores by the start of the decade, including stores that expanded into Canada and the UK by the end of the decade. While the original mail-order catalog service was shut down in 1990, that didn't mean that the popularity of the store was slowing down at all, or that the product line had any less variety. In 1993, Spencer's acquired Dappy, or Dapey, however you pronounce it, which was essentially another novelty store, but on the high-end side with licensed collectibles and glowing electronics. I don't personally see the appeal of a multi-$100 calculator, but I guess neon stuff just had a bigger market back then. Speaking of stuff that glows, the 90s did have a larger market for things that lit up and glowed in general. So in 1996, Spencer's launched their own separate concept store called Glow, which specialized in glowy things. It sold classic blacklight posters and lava lamps, but also included glow-in-the-dark merch and the newest trendy glowy thing, fiber optic lamps. So many fiber optic lamps. These additional stores, along with a colorful new logo and the launch of the Spencer Gifts website in 1994, were all part of the overall goal to be as wacky as possible in as many different niches and business ventures as possible. And it was working out. A parody of Spencer's called Pencer Gifts even appeared in an episode of Beavis and Butthead in 1997, stocking an appropriate amount of body jewelry, snarky t-shirts, and novelty merchandise. While parodies are, of course, made to poke fun at a concept instead of necessarily praising them, a parody in a popular show like this was a pretty good indication that they'd officially made it, or at the very least, that the image that they'd been cultivating for years was exactly what had stuck. Spencer's pop culture merch at the time often featured comedy or other media that was generally on the edgy side, rather than exclusively what was the most popular overall. South Park and The Simpsons, movies like the live-action Flintstones and Austin Powers series, and music merch of artists like Kiss and Ozzy Osbourne lined Spencer's shelves. And if you wanted something even more edgy, new adult-oriented things like these promiscuous lamps and NSFW teddy bears were sold to make sure that Spencer Gifts always had something for everyone. An increase in horror merch, even outside of the Halloween season, included classics and popular series like Scream, Child's Play, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Nightmare on Elm Street. And when it came to in-season Halloween stock, Spencer's expanded to open up their own Spencer Gifts Halloween pop-ups separate to the regular stores that were filled completely with exclusive Halloween products. Since they already had such a big hand in Halloween and horror, it only made sense that Spencer's then acquired Spirit Halloween in 1999, which took priority as their main Halloween-themed stores, and have made quite a name for themselves since then. By the 2000s, with so much expansion going on, the store was due for a rebrand, which came in 2003 with a name change from Spencer Gifts to just Spencer's, and the launch of another new logo. This rebrand was also eventually followed by store redesigns, stepping away from the colorful and neon-centric storefronts of the 80s and 90s. Fake bricks and a roller door gave off an urban street vibe to match the graffiti-style logo, and to seemingly better match the trending styles of skaters, punks, and other interests of the young and edgy demographic that Spencer's was continuing to cater to. The Spencer's website, which was only archived as far back as 2003, gives a broader look at how the store was branded and what it carried at the time. These 6 sections on the sidebar are a pretty great breakdown of the core genres and audiences that Spencer's merch was made for. Dorm room, centered around the decor that's popular with teenagers and young adults, where ocean blue was also centered on what's trendy, but with more of a focus in that classic Y2K Fruitiger Arrow inspired decor, namely dolphin statues, dolphin snow globes, dolphin lamps, fish lamps, and anything else you can think of that could have sparkling blue water, fish, or even more dolphins put on it. Enchanted Forest targeted a more psychedelic audience who might be perusing the various lava lamps that were always in stock, or any of the other whimsical, fantasy, and greenery-based products. Let's Party covered decorations and general party supplies, while the dark side carried all things dark and edgy, like dragons, skulls, dragons and skulls, and that pretty much covers everything. And of course, Pleasure Place is self-explanatory. There were plenty of other items that didn't fit into these few categories, like the Spencer's classic gag gifts, which were still going strong and now had an entire subcategory on the website dedicated to farts, and a collectibles section that featured pop culture from popular movies and cartoons to music, horror, and other licensed products of popular brands. While this reputation for, quote, specializing in fun gifts with a steady stream of outrageous, unusual, and irreverent products had been Spencer's main gimmick pretty much since it was founded, and even though adult-themed items had been carried since the 70s, as the number of stores continued to grow, complaints about the risque nature of Spencer's grew too. I doubt that complaints about the adult section in the back were unheard of by this point in the store's history, but at least in the late 2000s to early 2010s, some of the stories made news. Some people were upset that Spencer's was selling adult merchandise in a public space in the mall, parents were worried about the adult section existing at all, and some people claimed that Spencer's was selling the adult gifts to minors, and when asking an employee about it, the alleged response they got was, "The only thing we can't sell to kids is lighter fluid." Despite all the complaints, which seemed to mostly be coming from a loud minority, nothing substantial really came of it. In Rapid City, South Dakota, the police even seized all of Spencer's adult merchandise from the local mall as evidence of Spencer's not being registered as an adult-oriented business, which would be breaking a city ordinance. But as of right now, the Rapid City Spencer's is still open and running, so even if they did have to pay a fine for breaking the ordinance, not even police involvement had an effect on the adult section. In an official statement responding to every adult item-related complaint, Spencer's said that it informs guests before entering that a small portion of adult-themed merchandise is on display in the rear of the store, and that it's their policy to discourage the sale of items with an adult theme to guests under the age of majority. Considering that you can still find a Spencer's in most malls, including the adult section, even amidst the current state of department store bankruptcies and mall shutdowns, the statement seems like it covered their bases enough to basically say, if you're upset about it, it's not our problem. Even with all of the outrage, in the current era of the store, the adult section is still going strong, and for most people, it's what they immediately recognize Spencer's for. It's expanded to include not just directly explicit products, but also raunchy gag gifts, bachelor and bachelorette party supplies, adult health and wellness products, and plenty of other things that I can't show on my channel without a censor, but that are clear steps beyond the strip glasses of the 70s. The rest of modern Spencer's has also evolved with the times to accommodate the new modern age of trendy teenagers, edgy young adults, and everyone else in between. As much as the store has changed a lot since the old catalog days, the overall theme of the store is still based in novelty, or maybe quirkiness is more accurate to say. The gag gifts section has slimmed down to make way for any and every piece of merchandise that can be printed with something snarky, sarcastic, stolen from a meme, or vulgar just for the sake of being vulgar. Or anything else that millennials will find funny or that Gen X thinks will make them look badass. Okay, maybe that's a little harsh. It's not all bad, but a lot of this stuff is still really corny. Even though some t-shirts have meme quotes printed on them now, you can still find lots of familiar themes and media that are reminiscent of products that Spencer's has carried for years, like the categories from the old website. There's of course still lots of stuff that could fit into Pleasure Place, rave and party decor from Let's Party, not quite as many dolphins and fish, but still a wide variety of fairies, mushrooms, holistic healing, and psychedelic themes to fit into the vibe of Enchanted Forest. And the dark side is also still around, with tons of horror merch, skulls, dragons, body jewelry, and even a good amount of witchcraft-related items. Pop culture, outside of the horror theme, focuses on media that's popular but still fits into the overall edgy, quirky, and/or alternative vibe of the store. There's the more nerdy merch of gaming franchises, anime series, and superheroes, popular movies, cartoons, and TV shows, and a pretty extensive collection of music merch, with genres ranging from hip-hop to pop to metal. There's also a lot of food-related stuff. Officially licensed shirts and pillows and blankets of various food brands. What I find interesting about this wide variety of stock that Spencer's offers is that despite all of it keeping in line with an alternative theme, it's also still pretty basic overall. Alternatively generic, in a way. Like, sure, there's lots of horror stuff, but it's largely the same 10 or so well-known movies and franchises sold in hundreds of different ways. The video games are only the most popular games, and the featured bands are mostly the same bands that you can find printed on a t-shirt in almost any other store. It reminds me of the current state of Hot Topic, but even more watered down, just covering their bases enough to be labeled edgy without fully committing to the bit. So not just alternatively generic, but alternatively corporate. Of course, that doesn't mean that all or any of Spencer's merch is bad per se, or that if you like to shop there that you don't qualify as being alternative enough. I mean, it's a business, and a mall-operated business at that. It makes sense that it's going to stock products that will sell because they're popular, instead of something that earns brownie points for being extra niche, but that few people will actually buy. I just thought it was an interesting observation to make, considering the store didn't start as exclusively selling alternative or counterculture products, but has adopted and fully leaned into this theme over the years. I guess the main takeaway here is that Spencer's didn't just become some weird place overnight, or show up in a mall one day suddenly advertising to a specific demographic of people who like Doritos, lava lamps, and the Chucky movies. I do still think the people of the 60s and 70s, and probably the founder of Spencer Gifts himself, would find the overall vibe of the modern store to be a bit much, but the core values of novelty, humor, and fun are still mostly present in the current stores. Even though it seems like Spencer's is just a random collection of stuff with no central focus, most things that are sold have either been stocked for years or are a clear evolution of items that used to be sold and are now adjusted to fit a more modern market. While I'm still personally not really the target audience for 90% of what Spencer's sells, I can still appreciate how it got to where it is through sheer determination to be as outlandish as they want, and letting the customers who vibe with that come to them, embracing the weirdness together. Hi, welcome to JellyTV, where I shout out a video that I think deserves some love. I recommend watching the entire history of Club Penguin minigames by Fintendo. Like any kid who was chronically online in the 2000s, I loved Club Penguin, and especially sunk a ton of hours into the minigames. Fintendo explores every single minigame Club Penguin offered, and does such a great job in not just telling their history, but also including all these little extra details that made it even more interesting. If you're into Club Penguin lore, or also played the fishing, pizza, and coffee bean minigames on repeat like me, then you should give this video a watch. A huge thank you to Daniel E. from ABQ, Kevin Evans, Bunny, Bunzo, Karis Desarun, Chumby, Hayden Campbell, India W, Loj My Animal, Lou, Luna Stephenson, Mark Kent, Nighttime Coral, Ollie E, Paper Sam, Pharmamags, Pixel Puppy, Shaples, Theodore Nicolawilius, Vivian Valencia, and the rest of my patrons for supporting me.